The dinner rush at Royal Crown Restaurant was louder than usual that Friday night. Plates clattered. Wine glasses chimed. People laughed loudly beneath golden chandelier lights, while soft piano music floated through the expensive dining hall. Outside, Los Angeles shimmered with rain-soaked streets and neon reflections. Inside, everyone looked happy. Everyone except Emily Carter. 28-year-old Emily moved quickly between tables, with a polite smile painted across her face. But behind her eyes lived a grief so deep it felt impossible to survive. 3 months earlier, she had lost her 5-year-old son, Noah, in a tragic car accident. And ever since that day, nothing in her life felt real anymore. Not the smiles, not the conversations, not even the sound of her own voice. She still woke up some nights, thinking she heard Noah laughing in the hallway. Sometimes she caught herself buying his favorite cereal before remembering he was gone. Gone forever. People told her time would heal her, but they were wrong. Time didn't heal anything. It only taught people how to hide pain better. "Emily, table 9 needs refills," another waitress called. Emily nodded quickly. Coming, she grabbed the pitcher and forced herself to keep moving, because if she stopped moving, she would think, and thinking hurt too much. That night had already been exhausting when the restaurant doors slowly opened again. A cold wind swept inside, and with it came an elderly woman. The room changed instantly. Not loudly, just subtly. People noticed her, then quickly looked away. The woman looked around 65 years old. Her gray coat was old and soaked from the rain. Her shoes were worn out. Her thin hands trembled slightly as she stepped carefully into the restaurant. She didn't belong there. At least, that's what everyone seemed to think. A wealthy couple near the entrance exchanged uncomfortable glances. One man whispered, "Why would they even let her in here?" Another customer quietly laughed. "Probably homeless." The old woman heard every word, but she kept her eyes lowered and slowly walked toward the farthest corner table in the restaurant. Table 12. Emily watched silently from across the room. Something about the woman felt painfully familiar. Not because Emily knew her, but because she recognized that look. The look of someone carrying unbearable sadness. A young waiter approached the table impatiently. "What can I get for you?" The woman looked at the menu nervously, then quietly asked, "How much is the cheapest thing?" The waiter sighed. "Soup is $12. The woman slowly reached into her pocket and counted a few coins with shaking fingers. Her face fell. She didn't have enough. After a long silence, she looked up softly. "Could I just have a glass of water, please?" The waiter nodded coldly and walked away. Several nearby customers smirked. Emily felt something break inside her chest, because suddenly she remembered Noah. One rainy afternoon a year earlier, Emily and Noah had stopped at a diner after school. A homeless man sat outside asking for food. Emily had been in a hurry and tried walking past him, but Noah stopped. "Mommy? What is it, baby? If we have food and he doesn't that make him sad?" Emily smiled sadly at the memory. Noah had always noticed people others ignored. Always. And suddenly Emily couldn't stand there another second. She walked straight into the kitchen. Her coworker Marcus looked up. "What are you doing?" Emily grabbed a bowl. "She's hungry." Marcus lowered his voice. "You know the manager hates this stuff." "I don't care." She filled a tray with hot soup, fresh bread, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, tea, and a slice of chocolate pie. Enough food for a real meal. Then she paid for everything herself. When she carried the tray across the restaurant, people stared. The manager noticed immediately. "What are you doing? She needs food. This isn't a charity center." Emily looked him directly in the eyes. "She's still human." The manager opened his mouth, then stopped, because something in Emily's expression made it impossible to argue. Emily gently placed the food in front of the old woman. The woman's eyes widened instantly. Oh no, honey, I can't afford this. Emily smiled softly. It's already paid for. The woman looked stunned. Why would you do this for me? Emily hesitated, then quietly answered, because somebody once taught me that kindness matters. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. For a few seconds she couldn't speak. Then finally she whispered, "Thank you." Emily nodded gently and started walking away, but something stopped her. The woman looked so alone sitting there, so broken. Without thinking, Emily pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "What's your name?" Emily asked softly. "Margaret." "I'm Emily." Margaret smiled faintly. "You have kind eyes." Emily almost laughed at that. Kind eyes. If only Margaret knew how empty she truly felt inside. Margaret slowly picked up the spoon. Her hands trembled badly, and as she ate, tears quietly rolled down her cheeks. Emily noticed immediately. "Is the food okay?" Margaret nodded. "It's wonderful." "Then why are you crying?" Margaret looked down at the soup. "Because nobody has sat with me during dinner in a very long time." Emily felt her throat tighten painfully. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Margaret looked carefully at Emily. "You're carrying grief." Emily froze. "What?" "I can see it," Margaret whispered gently. "I know what grief looks like." Emily's eyes immediately filled with tears. Most people avoided talking about Noah now. Friends changed the subject. Co-workers acted awkward. Even relatives stopped mentioning his name. Like pretending he never existed somehow made things easier. But this stranger saw it instantly. Emily looked away quickly. "My son died." Margaret's expression broke completely. "Oh, sweetheart." Emily swallowed hard. "He was 5. The restaurant noise suddenly felt distant, muted, like the world had moved far away. Margaret reached across the table slowly. "You loved him very much." Emily laughed bitterly through tears. "He was my whole world." Margaret squeezed her hand gently. "What was his name?" Emily's lips trembled. "Noah." For some reason, Margaret suddenly stopped breathing for a second. Like the name hit her deeply. Then she whispered softly, "What happened?" Emily closed her eyes. "There was a car accident." Her voice cracked instantly. "A drunk driver ran a red light." Margaret's eyes filled with tears too now. Emily continued speaking before she lost courage. "I wasn't there when he died." That sentence destroyed her every time she said it. "I keep thinking," Emily whispered, "what if he was scared?" Her breathing became uneven. "What if he thought I abandoned him?" Margaret suddenly looked devastated, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Then quietly she asked, "What was he wearing that day?" Confusion. "A blue sweater." Margaret covered her mouth with shaking fingers. Tears spilled down her face instantly. Emily stared at her. "Why are you crying?" Margaret slowly reached into her old coat pocket. Her trembling hands pulled out something tiny. A small blue toy car. Emily's heart stopped. The entire world froze. Noah had owned that exact toy. Not similar. Exact. There was even a tiny scratch near the wheel where he once dropped it at the playground. Emily grabbed the toy with shaking hands. "Oh my God." Her breathing became frantic. "Where did you get this?" Margaret broke down crying. Real, uncontrollable sobbing. "I was there," she whispered. Emily stared blankly. "What?" "That night, the accident." Emily couldn't move. Margaret's entire body shook as she spoke. Everyone else pulled out their phones. Tears streamed endlessly down her wrinkled cheeks. But I ran to him. Emily felt her knees weaken beneath the table. He was alone. He was so small and so scared. Emily covered her mouth in horror. "No." Margaret nodded through tears. I held his hand. Emily's body collapsed against the chair. The restaurant around them had gone silent. Even customers were listening now. Margaret kept crying. He kept asking for you. Emily made a broken sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. Margaret looked directly into her eyes. And before the ambulance came, she paused, struggling to breathe. He told me something. Emily shook uncontrollably. What did he say? Margaret's voice shattered. He said, "Tell my mommy I love her." Emily broke completely. A cry escaped her so painfully that several people in the restaurant began crying too. Years of grief exploded out of her at once. She buried her face into her hands and sobbed uncontrollably. Margaret immediately moved beside her and wrapped trembling arms around her shoulders. He wasn't alone, Margaret whispered repeatedly. He wasn't alone. Emily clung to the old woman like she was drowning. Because for 3 months, one thought had tortured her every single night. Did Noah die scared and alone? And now, finally, she had her answer. No. Someone had held him. Someone had comforted him. Someone had loved him in his final moments. Margaret gently stroked Emily's hair. He was brave, she whispered, and he talked about you constantly. Emily cried harder. He loved you so much. The restaurant manager quietly turned away, wiping tears from his eyes. Customers who had judged Margaret earlier now looked ashamed. One woman covered her mouth, crying silently. A man near the bar removed his glasses to wipe his eyes, because suddenly nobody saw an old poor woman anymore. They saw humanity, pain, love, loss. Emily finally looked up. How did you find me? Margaret smiled sadly. I didn't. She glanced around the restaurant softly. I just came here because I was hungry. Emily stared at her in disbelief. The odds felt impossible, like fate itself had brought them together. Margaret looked embarrassed suddenly. I actually almost didn't come inside. Why? She gave a weak smile. People usually don't want someone like me around. Emily looked at the wet coat, the trembling hands, the tired eyes, and for the first time that night, she truly noticed how exhausted Margaret looked. Do you have somewhere to stay? Margaret hesitated too long before answering. Not tonight. Emily made her decision instantly. You're coming home with me. Margaret's eyes widened. Oh no, sweetheart, I couldn't. You can. That night, for the first time since Noah died, Emily didn't go home to an empty apartment. She and Margaret sat together at the kitchen table, drinking tea until nearly sunrise. They talked for hours. About Noah, about grief, about loneliness. Margaret admitted she had lost her husband years earlier, and eventually lost her apartment after medical debt destroyed her finances. Little by little, life had pushed her onto the streets. And once you end up there, people stop seeing you as human. Emily listened quietly, because she understood that feeling too. After Noah died, people looked at her differently, like grief had made everyone uncomfortable. Before leaving that morning, Margaret gently touched Noah's framed photo, sitting on the shelf. He had your smile, she whispered. Emily cried softly again, but this time the tears felt different, not empty, healing. Over the next few weeks, Margaret and Emily became inseparable. Emily helped her find shelter, then proper housing, then medical care, and in return, Margaret helped Emily survive her grief. Whenever Emily had nightmares, Margaret stayed beside her. Whenever Emily blamed herself, Margaret reminded her, "Your son left this world knowing he was loved." That sentence slowly saved Emily's life. Months later, Emily returned to work at Royal Crown Restaurant. But something had changed. She smiled for real now. Not because the pain disappeared, but because hope had returned. And one evening, a little boy walked past the restaurant, holding his mother's hand. He dropped a toy car accidentally near the entrance. Emily picked it up and handed it back to him. The little boy smiled. Emily smiled warmly, then quietly whispered, "You're welcome, sweetheart." As the boy walked away, Margaret stepped beside her. "You okay?" Emily nodded softly, while tears filled her eyes. "Yeah." She looked toward the sky outside the restaurant window. For the first time in a long time, she truly meant it. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from forgetting the people we lost. Sometimes healing comes from discovering that love never really leaves us at all. And sometimes the stranger sitting alone at table 12 ends up changing your life forever.